Hi, I'm Urmi Desai, and this is the Move Smartly Show. It's once again time for our in-depth consumer question segment, which we call The Situation. As usual, I ask my co-host, John Pasalis, broker and president at Realosophy Realty here in Toronto, about the questions you send to us each month about the pressing real estate questions you are facing throughout the Toronto real estate market. If you find this segment useful, please hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel or leave us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening to us. We are seeing that more and more of you are listening to us each month or each show, which is absolutely great. Thank you so much. And we'd love to get the word out through our higher numbers so that we can share this content with even more consumers like you. And now onto the show. Hi, John, you ready to go?
Ready to go. Looking forward to today's segment. I think this series is probably one of my favorite ones. I mean, I think it's, everyone thinks real estate's just, sales, selling houses. But I think these are the human questions and the human concerns and the tensions and the challenges, I think that are, more interesting and I think more important and, helps people shape their decision making. So I think for me, I enjoy talking about them and I appreciate all the questions we get. And on that note, I mean, for anyone who has any more specific questions, wants to meet with me and my team for a consult, you can do that, of course, online. Just go to movesmartly.com/meetjohn, or just send over an email at askjohn@movesmartly.com and we can do that as well.
Great. Thanks, John. And you can find the links that John mentioned in our show notes. And there'll be other links. Any other links we mentioned will be there too. So that's great. John, I also think this brings out the professor in you. I know that you love asking questions. You're the first volunteer to even go into Rotman and the other real estate programs to answer questions. So I think that appeals to that side of you.
I think so.
All right, let's start with question number 1. Hi, John. I watch your videos monthly and enjoy them thoroughly, and I thought I'd ask my question on a personal situation. I'm newly married, and I also have a baby on the way in March. Congratulations. I bought a 1-bedroom pre-construction condo in Mississauga in 2019, but it has seen significant delays, and the closing is likely now in 2026. I don't see this as a comfortable living space for my growing family. We're currently living with my parents and would like to move out into our own place by either buying or renting. I have saved up approximately $180,000 and we have an annual household income of approximately $145,000. I was thinking of putting a down payment on a house within the GTA sometime in 2024, but with interest rates still high and affordability stretched, I'm wondering if I should purchase a home now or rent and wait for the condo to be completed so we can sell it to add to our home buying budget and buy then. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Thanks, Peter.
That's a very good question. Before I kind of say what I think, what I would do if I was in that situation, I think it's worth kind of unpacking. I think what I think most agents would say to do, especially before this most recent slowdown, and probably you get a lot of people saying it now. And I think the most common answer, I suspect, would be from most agents is just buy now. In 3 years, you just flip your condo, you assign it, you don't have to take possession, but at least you'll have the home you're living in for 3 years. And I think this is, I think that's maybe an okay answer when prices are rising 10% per year, for example. And it's easy to flip condos, but prices are unlikely to be rising 10% per year. And we don't know what it's going to be like when it comes to flipping a condo potentially in 2026. So I think the important thing for Peter to consider is the one problem with buying a home right now, as desirable as it might be. I mean, yes, there's affordability challenge or whatever, but let's just say they can afford one for their family. The problem is if you buy one in 2024, the bigger concern is not buying. The bigger concern is thinking about what happens in 2026 when you're scheduled to get the condo, right? Can you even get a mortgage? And most likely on the income that, they're talking about, they probably cannot afford a single family home for their family and a condominium, right? Without going to some kind of private lender and paying insane interest rates. So the problem they would face is that, maybe they'd buy a home, but in 2 years they'd have this property that'd be closing that they can't close on. You know, and I should unpack when we talk about assigning or flipping. This is when you're trying to sell a condo that you've bought pre-construction before you actually own it. It's like the shadow market because some people who bought them can't advertise them on the MLS. You know, it's done through lists and private Facebook groups. And a lot of people, this is what we're seeing right now. A lot of people got pre-construction condos are scheduled to close right now, can't close, either because they don't have the income, rates are too high, you know, it's not worth what they paid for it. There's any number of reasons why the buyers can't close, and they're trying to flip them to somebody else who can close, right?
And let me jump in, John, with a few just more clarifiers here.
Yeah.
So the reason this situation happens, and it's been common in the Toronto area, which has, I think, the most condos under construction in North America, is you buy the condos using a down payment schedule. It is not as big of a down payment as when you go to get an actual mortgage. You're not actually getting the mortgage for that unit yet. When it completes and you take possession, you then go out to get the mortgage.
Exactly.
That is when the traditional, you know, looking at your income and down payment come into play, and you have to qualify at whatever the mortgage rates are. So for those that are a bit unfamiliar, that is how you can buy a pre-construction condo and, you know, put only the payment schedule down, which is approximately how much, John, over the years that it's being built?
Let's just say 20%, and it's usually staged over a number of years. So, you know, you're going to have equity in that property, but the challenges again are in some cases, I mean, we have clients who had to sell their condos that were scheduling to be completed for less than what they paid for them because they couldn't close, but also because when they were trying to sell them, like the condo was not worth what they paid for it. Like the resale market was actually lower. And this happened because they only bought maybe a couple of years ago. So the prices hadn't increased very much.
And before you continue, Peter seems to have a really big down payment for his potential new home purchase. Does that matter? $180,000?
No, it's great that they have a big down payment. But again, it doesn't matter in the sense that, yeah, maybe it's enough to buy the home they want today, but it may not help them when it comes to closing on the condominium, right? And this is where you have, you know, potential problems in the future. So, I mean, again, I'm, you know, people need to take my advice always with a grain of salt because I'm highly risk averse. I mean, I am, you know, some people would just fly by the seat of their pants and load up on real estate and not worry about, you know, what the market's going to be in 2026 until 2026. I'm obviously not in that camp. And, you know, I kind of try to think about the worst case scenarios to mitigate those risks, quite frankly. Which is a slightly different approach from most people in my industry. So, I mean, personally, probably what I would do, I mean, I'd probably just rent for 2 years, quite frankly. You know, I would wait for the condo to be completed. I would, you know, eventually close on it because he should be making money on it, quite frankly. If you bought in 2019 and it's closing 2026, hopefully, you know, he's going to get back the equity that he's put into the down payment, and maybe the unit has got up in value and probably should have. Again, this is not a forecast of where price will be in 2026. It's just that with such a long time horizon, usually you're up. So, you know, you sell the unit, then you have even a much even bigger down payments to use towards your principal residence. And you don't have to worry about the situation where you have to own 2 properties at once, which is very hard. So again, I mean, not, you know, maybe the story that some people want to hear because some people don't want to rent, they just want to buy their home. But, you know, if you're buying your home, you just have to be, Peter wants to buy a home, he just needs to be mindful of the risks that come up in 2026. And yeah, maybe the market's going to explode and he's going to make money on his home and his condo and everyone's going to be happy. But maybe it's not. And, you know, you need to be prepared to close on the condominium. Otherwise, you're kind of defaulting on the transaction.
And does that mean, John, then you lose the buyer deposits you've put in?
I mean, potentially there's risks, right? If the property ends up being worth less than what he paid for it, the builder can sue you for the difference. There's all sorts of, you know, again, I think it just depends on the situation. But if you're buying a pre-con unit, you want to be in a position where you can close on it. There are some people today who are trying to assign because they prefer to, but are willing to and prepared to close. You know, this is a better position to be in as a buyer. because you're not as vulnerable in the market if you're able to close on it. And that's what they need to be prepared for. And my instinct is if he buys the house now, there's very little chance that he can close on the condo, which puts you as a homeowner and a home buyer in a far more vulnerable position when you have this asset that you've purchased and committed to buying, but you can't actually buy it, right? And you can't really advertise it for sale easily because it's an assignment and builders won't allow that. So you just leave yourself in a vulnerable situation, and I hate feeling vulnerable, so I probably wouldn't do that.
All right. So let's move now to question number 2. Hi, John. I've been following you and Urmi on Move Smartly closely and appreciate your thought leadership. Thank you. I'm reaching out to you today, hoping you can give me your advice on my resale condo. It's been on the market for 23 days with few showings, despite comparables suggesting that it is priced right. Should I lower the price again? I've already reduced it by $20,000 after the Thanksgiving long weekend. Or do I take it off the market and wait to sell it in the summer of 2025 or 26? Waiting to sell and renting it out instead would result in a negative cash flow for me of about $1,200 a month. Even if I could carry this loss on a monthly basis, I'm worried about future price declines. If there's no appreciation by that time relative to today, I think I'm better off just selling now. Also, please note, I must sell by spring 2026 for personal reasons. I heard you mention in a recent video on the Move Smartly YouTube channel that many real estate agents struggle in a slow market, and I suspect mine might be one of them. I've had to prompt them for comparables and neighborhood sales data, and I'm driving most of the strategy discussions. I'm considering finding a more experienced agent. What would your recommendation be? I really appreciate your help. Thanks, Jaya.
So that's a great question. And as part of that request, we did get actually an email. I mean, Jaya shared the link.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I should have added. Jaya did share a link and other comparables for the neighborhood. So you have had a look of that information.
I mean, I looked at it very quickly, and I think this kind of unpacks what I mean generally when I say that agents are struggling. So when you have a client saying they are driving the analysis and the research and looking up at the comparables, and that is terrible. I mean, that is not even a function of a slow market. I mean, that should not be happening in any market, right? And I think this really, her email kind of highlights the problem. So, she sent her unit, which is great. I mean, and 3 seemingly comparable units. The problem is, her unit is in a particular condo building in one part of Toronto, and the comparable units that she sent were 3 similarly sized or similar units in different buildings that were currently listed for sale. Okay. Now, that is not how to look at comparable sales for a number of reasons, right? And I think this is, again, it's if you have the client doing this research and concluding that the comparables justify the price and their agent's not explaining them, well, why you can't do that, that's a bit of a problem. So why can't you do that? Number one, they're active listings. You can, when you're looking at the thing about what is my property worth, what is my condo worth, what's my home worth, you cannot compare it with homes that are actively listed for sale. You have to compare against homes that have actually sold, because those comparables, if you want to call them that, may be overpriced. So it's not telling us anything when we're comparing our condo unit against other units that are actively listed for sale and have not sold. That's the first problem. The second problem is you cannot compare your unit in your building against other units in other buildings, even if they look similar and are similar in size. They are not, you cannot use them as comparables, because different buildings were built in different years, have different ages, are built like different ages, have different amenities, have different finishes, have different ceiling heights. And all of those factors can impact the valuation. Now, I should clarify, like when we look at homes, obviously we're going to pick 4 different homes in the same neighborhood to compare and figure out what a property's worth. With condos, it's very different. We can only generally use comparables in the same building, because two condo buildings that are literally across the street from each other can have very different prices per square foot when you actually look at the details. And that could be driven by the age of the building, the amenities. Maybe one has higher maintenance fees because they have a special assessment. There are all sorts of reasons why there can be differences. So she needs to be looking, her agent should be looking at comparables in her own building. Now, even when I looked at that, it's tricky because there actually weren't many direct comparables that were, very similar to her unit. Like when we look at the size, no parking or whatever the details were. So, when you do this, it's a little bit trickier. But I mean, without getting into details, generally speaking, what you're looking at is when you look at sort of my particular unit and I want to see, well, what is it worth? You look at all the other units that have sold. And generally with condominiums, you look at, well, what is the typical price per square foot in my building, right? And you have to make adjustments for whether one has parking or not, of course, because this impacts the value, lockers and things like that. And of course, slight differences with layouts, configurations, corner units might be a little bit more desirable than these long, narrow ones. And then on top of that, you ideally want to compare, if you're a one-bedroom condo, you want to be comparing against other one-bedroom condos in your building, because the larger units, like a two-bedroom unit, usually larger units sell for a slightly lower price per square foot than a smaller unit, even in the same building, right? Because it's just the way it is. I mean, small studios are going to sell for a higher price per square foot than a 1,500 square foot two-bedroom condo, right? So you want to look at, say, all the one bedrooms and what is sort of the typical price per square foot for them. And when you look at it, I think, and I really looked at this closely, she might be priced a little bit high, right? And even though she thinks that it's priced fairly because there are other units available for sale in her price range, that's irrelevant, right? What's relevant is what is available in her building, at what price point, and what has sold in her building. And if you look at the price per square foot for that unit versus all the other ones in her building, it looks maybe like it is a little bit high. And I think this is the important thing when you have, when your agent's representing you. Listen, we have the same problems in our own office. I mean, the market is slow. When the market's slow, a good agent is not going to drive 10 showings a week in this condo market. Like the showings are slow for everybody. It doesn't matter who the agents are. I think the more important thing is good agents should just be advising their clients and saying, these are, I think, the challenges why we're not getting showings, and maybe one of them is we're priced a little high and here is why, and that's not a great conversation to have sometimes with clients, because everyone wants to hear that their unit's worth more than it might be. But, the point is, I think that information is important because it allows the client to make an informed decision. Like we just had a listing a little while ago. It was an investor, had a house, wanted to sell it. And we weren't getting a ton of activity either. I mean, again, we're not, we can't create the market, but our story to him was, we're not getting activity because I think we're priced high, right? So, we either reduce it to come to the market, or we should just list it for rent, and I'm not going to tell him what to do. It's his property. And he said, you know what, that's fair. Let's list it for rent. And we ended up renting it, which is perfectly fine. I mean, it's his property. We're not, because he didn't want to reduce the price to where the market is, right? And I think that's the whole point. It's like you're trying to give them information so they can make informed decisions. And in his case, the informed decision is, okay, if I'm not going to get the price I want, I'm just going to list it for rent then, right? And I think that's the key thing. So I think that unit might be priced a little bit high. Whether to wait or not is a whole other story and challenge. I mean, being cash flow negative is $1,200 a month is a lot. I mean, and I don't know if, for people who aren't sure what that means. I mean, the idea is you're renting it. Your rent is $1,200 less than the cost of carrying the condo. That is a lot of money for a lot of people.
And again, John, that's due to the really high interest rates right now.
Yeah, due to the high interest rates. I mean, and who knows? Maybe she doesn't have a high interest. Maybe there's just a mortgage. It's just even with what she has now, it's higher. The mortgage, maintenance fees, and property taxes are higher than the rental income that can be earned. So again, I mean, if the important thing is to look at what the market is, and you should be priced at the market. And you need to be on top of the market. I think the other thing I mentioned in that segment is we need to be looking. And I think the exercise that she did, which is looking at what other buildings are priced at, what other buildings are selling for, I think that's an important exercise. So even though I said you need to look at your building to come up with comparables and valuation, yes, we should be looking at what the other inventory is on the market. So I don't mean to suggest that those are irrelevant, because part of the exercise is, well, what is selling in my area? Why are those ones selling at those prices? How long were they on the market for? Or were they priced at a per square foot? How is that pricing relative to other units in their building? Because I think that informs what's going on in our market generally, right? So it's important to look at what neighboring buildings are doing and how much inventory there is. But I think it's important to obviously price it for the right price in your building.
And John, yes, I think that is helpful, and hopefully Joya finds it. As the condo listings start to climb in some areas of the GTA, isn't it also risky that, if 2 or 3 units are in your condo and you're priced a bit high, you're really going to be overlooked? In a way that houses, for example, on a street will always have a few more differences. It seems to me that in a condo building, you run that risk even more. Is that fair? Or
100%? Yeah. If there's you're exactly. And I think it kind of makes you a little bit more vulnerable. We had that situation actually, even with a home that we were listing in Markham that was newly completed, and there's an identical home also newly completed on the 5 doors down that listed,
yes,
right?
Because those subdivisions are like the models are all identical, right?
Exactly. And that is rare, because usually with homes, even though they're similar, there are differences. You know what I mean? Right. But this is a very classic example where the homes were almost identical. Aside from slight differences in finishes, they're pretty much very similar homes. And yeah, we were vulnerable to what that other person's doing, how they're pricing, how they're listing. If we sold first, but if they sold first, they would have impacted our sale price, right? So similarly to your point, yeah, if you are a unit in a building and you have a particular layout and size, and there's another 4 units that are very similar, yeah, you're kind of, you are in some ways influenced by what they're doing and how they're pricing and how motivated they are, and what they sell at, right? And again, you're trying to stand out as much as you can from the other homes or condos in this case that are in the same building. I think in this example, there weren't other units that were identical to this one. I think the other 1 bedrooms that were listed were slightly larger. So in some ways, that's a good position to be in. But I think even with that difference, it seemed like this unit is a little bit higher price per square foot compared to some of the other ones. So,
and I imagine experienced agents are really picking up the phone and calling each other. They have that rapport and that ability to talk to the other agents, even if in a way you're in competition, you have similar houses and condos. But again, that's what with experience, you have the confidence to do that. Do you feel that a less experienced agent might not do that? Might
yeah,
not
100%.
really pick up the phone and ask because you're afraid, right?
I think so. I think that's super important. Like you good agents are communicating with each other if we have similar comparable listings. And I think it is an important exercise to ask people, what are they doing? How many showings are they getting? And listen, I think it's funny sometimes when we do it, and you can tell when other agents don't do it, because when we do it, some agents are caught off guard and they're very kind of keep all the info to themselves. They think that but at the end of the day, we're all benefiting from each other's knowledge. At the end of the day, everyone wants to get the highest price, right? We want them to get the highest price if they're very similar to us, right? So there's no benefit, and not cooperating. And most good agents, I feel, are very cooperative. They talk about what's going on with their listings, how many showings they're getting, if their offer night failed, what price ranges were their offers in. Some people will be very upfront about what is happening. And I do think that is important information for agents and for their clients to understand sort of these nuances and dynamics, because we're in a very different market. People don't understand that the market was booming 6 months ago. Today, I mean, I think in the she's talking about very few showings. everyone's getting very few showings, right? And so it's not just her, um, you know, but maybe like the pricing of the unit might be the difference between selling and not. But that it's not like if you price a property, you're gonna have 10 showings a week. No one's getting 10 showings a week. I mean, very few, especially for condos. So I think that is, an important challenge. I think that she needs to be mindful of.
Great. And hopefully Jaya found that all very interesting as well. And if you have any more follow-up to that, Jaya, more questions, again, the show notes will have the links for you to follow up to with John in more detail. Let's go to question 3. Hi, John and Urmi. Hope this message finds you well. Always grateful for your reports and webinars. I have a question for you. I'm not in a rush to sell, but I hope to downsize within the city of Toronto in the foreseeable future for a number of reasons, including my mortgage interest rate, which is currently at a never to be seen again 1.69%, coming up for renewal in spring 2026. And I don't anticipate I'll be able to afford the mortgage if interest rates haven't come down dramatically by then. I could arguably sell anytime, but I'd like to wait the 2.5 years until that time. But as I read the news, I'm wondering about those of us who are currently fortunate enough to have affordable mortgages, but who will have to renew in the future at higher rates, and who may become part of a cohort of so-called distressed sellers. Is it possible to project to that timeline and anticipate what selling and buying scenarios might look like then? Since I would be downsizing by then, even if home prices fall generally, the primary issue for me would be whether I could sell for the price I'd need to be able to afford to buy my next home. So would it be better to sell and buy before that time? Kindest regards, Miriam.
So this is an important question, and anyone who's watched our monthly live updates that I do with David LaRock, the mortgage broker, knows that we talked about this issue. And the issue is that most banks and policymakers are worried most about the mortgages that are going to be renewing in 2025 and 2026, because the mortgages that are renewing now were mortgages. If we look sort of 5 years back when many of people's mortgage took out their mortgages, they would have had today's owners are going to have like a 3% or 3.5% mortgage rate, and they're renewing at 6%. So yes, it's a huge increase, but not as significant as the mortgages that were taken out in 2020 and 2021, like this one, in the 1% range, right? So when you go from a mortgage of 1.69 to 6.69, that is a massive increase. And this is why many people are worried about sort of that time period, especially if rates stay elevated. So she's, correct to be concerned about what happens. So the question, should she sell now or should she wait? I mean, I don't see the rush to sell now, quite frankly, especially if she wants to live where she is. Like, we don't need to panic right away. I mean, there's like many years between now. Who knows what's going to happen between now and 2026? Having said that, I would not wait for 3 months before your mortgage is up for renewal to sell your home and plan your next steps, right? So at what point do you start planning? I mean, I'd say easily a year before, right? Because, especially as someone who needs the time to transactions, buy and sell, you need to make decisions about which one you're doing first, depending on the market dynamics at that time, right? And in today's market, it's very risky to buy first and then sell. Unless you have a home that is going to sell for a certain price, it's like a super nice home. And even then, you don't know what the market's going to be like. So most people are selling first and then buying, right? To mitigate the risk of, what happens if their home doesn't sell. So, if I'm in her shoes, I probably would be looking at planning my next steps at least a year before her renewal, right? And I think the reason I say it's, not the end of the world, and we don't need to worry about it quite yet, because I think, as she touched on, like, if the market falls, at the end of the day, she's looking at a particular area, like, you're looking at buying another home in the same area. I mean, her house might dip a little bit. The home she's potentially moving to might dip a little bit. It's a bit of a wash in many ways, right? So, I mean, I think it's, you're better off just, holding on to your home, living in it. I mean, if you talk to some Twitter housing bears, they tell you to sell and rent and time the market and then buy at the bottom. But I mean, I'm not skilled enough to know when that is. So, most of us don't make decisions that way because we can't time the market. So I think it's important to sort of time around, your lifestyle while reducing the risk. And you reduce the risk by planning to move well before your mortgage renewal is up. And you start thinking about it maybe even a year and a half before, but start actively maybe looking at buying or planning, 12 months before, so you're not caught in this last minute period where, you have to sell because you can't afford to renew.
All right. And I think hopefully that helps Miriam. I know that in my case, when I have a really tricky decision to make, understanding the time frame of what time I have really helps, especially if I'm anxious about a lot of moving pieces. So hopefully that is helpful. And then we have our final question number 4. Dear John, I'm finding this market very confusing. I don't think you're alone. I hear news about the market cooling, and some of my friends tell me that they are seeing this in the condo market. But in the areas I'm looking at in downtown Toronto, I'm still finding that there are very few houses available for sale. And most of the nice ones are still listing low and getting multiple offers. And some are still selling for way over asking. Why does the market seem to cool in for some types of homes and in some areas and remain competitive in others? If high interest rates are cooling the market overall, shouldn't prices be falling for all home types and areas? Thank you for your time in answering my question. Regards, Bob. A good question.
It is a good question. And it's a fantastic question because the market is confusing. And he's correct. All of these things are happening. And it seems like they're inconsistent because you have, some areas of the market very slow, other areas seemingly busy. And it's hard to make sense of what's happening. So let me just kind of unpack what's happening as best as I can. Yes, the market has slowed down dramatically since, I'd say, the summer, quite frankly. The market was unbelievably competitive in the spring, and then it turned on a dime in July and August and has slowed down dramatically. Inventory is built up, and there are just far fewer buyers. And there's far fewer buyers because, mortgage rates are in the high 6% range right now. So it's a lot harder to buy, and this is really killing demand. So in some areas of the market, condos in particular, in some regions, in the 905, like it's typical that you list a condo and you're getting maybe 2-3 showings a week. Like it's that slow. And some are selling if you're priced well. There's still buyers out there. There's still activity, but it's very slow. And, some are certainly getting better. If you have more showings, if you have a unique unit that doesn't come up very often, you're getting more than that. But some properties are just not very active just because there's more inventory and not as many buyers, right? Similarly with houses, some markets so we talk about houses, low rise, like detached semis. Some areas in the GTA are also similarly relatively slow, and homes are sitting on the market, and there are no more bidding wars in some of the 905 areas. Homes are just sitting on the market. And some urban homes, like kind of downtown in some neighborhoods, and we have clients looking, he's 100% correct. If that's where you're looking, you see some areas and homes are pricing low and still getting bidding wars. And now I'll say a couple of things. I mean, the bidding war thing is really partly a function of, how the home's priced. I mean, you had clients who, bought a home in the east end of Toronto. I mean, the house had 10 offers on it. I mean, it had 10 offers on it partly because it was just priced ridiculously low. Like it was priced way below what it was worth. And it happened to be just a beautiful home, right? So, you price something way less than what it's worth and it looks beautiful and amazing, you're going to get 10 offers, right? But even in the low-rise market, yes, it's still, there are still homes getting bidding wars. I'd say far fewer than we would have in the past. So the market's not as frenzied as it was. Even low-rise homes are getting fewer showings than they were in the spring. So, even though you have homes selling for over asking, again, this is just a function of some of these markets in the city just don't have as much inventory right now, and that's just the reality. So agents are just, wanting to make sure that they maximize the exposure, listed low, but many of them are selling for, a relatively reasonable value range, I'd say. And again, even in the urban core, I'd say it's the nicer homes that are working and getting, working. When I'm thinking about working from a seller's perspective, their offer nights are working. Your offer night does not work if it comes in, there's no offers and you have to increase your price, right? So the homes that are, okay, good, but not amazing, are not getting offers on offer night. They're relisting, they're increasing their price, and they're taking offers anytime, and they're sitting in the market a little bit longer. Homes that are staged and show well and are turnkey usually are a little bit more competitive. So again, that is the market right now. I think we're, as agents, as clients, whatever, we have to see how that evolves. And I think a big function of it is going to be how much inventory comes on the market. And if inventory is relatively tight, that is going to keep the market, somewhat more competitive in the downtown core. And I was talking with one of my agents actually this afternoon. Like, it seems like in some of the areas downtown, yeah, there are houses for sale, but some of them are just dumpy or duplexes and triplexes, like not as many options for people who want sort of this family home. So I think that's one factor that's kind of impacting some neighborhoods in the city. Even with our own clients who are looking, it's like some of them are active, but we're not even going out and looking at homes very much because there's just not a lot to look at. So it is a tricky market. And again, I think this really touches on the fact that, this is actually what I do a lot of my research on, is that there are like micro trends in housing markets. You cannot just say, well, what has happened in the GTA? What's happening in the condo market is different from the low-rise market. And then, of course, there are differences geographically. Like, what is happening in the low-rise market in downtown Toronto can be very different from what's happening in the low-rise market in the suburbs or the outer suburbs. So we have to be looking at these micro differences to kind of understand these dynamics, whether we're buying or selling, because I think it does impact our decision making either way.
Right. So it's like the tide overall is going out, but not, it's not necessarily taking all boats down at the same level. There's still that nicer boat on the end of the bay in the nicer part of the bay. So yeah, that's kind of what you're seeing. And do you think also that everybody is just anticipating the next rate announcement? And I asked this because our questions earlier speak to the fact that so many people are stuck and not able to buy, right? And so people seem to be stuck. If you don't know what you can afford when you buy, you can't sell what you have right now, right? Yeah. So is there a bit of a freeze, in your opinion, until we start to see some clarity around rates?
So it's actually interesting. I think there's a bit of a freeze on buying, right? Which does raise an important question. I think it's something I have to spend some time to look into, like what's driving the increase in listings, right? A year ago, September, October, the market really felt more frozen because sales were low and listings were low. So that to me is what I think of when I think of like a frozen market. It's kind of
like we saw it, at the onset of the lockdown during COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
Both sides froze.
People can't buy and they can't sell. So both listings and sales kind of drop dramatically, right? Whereas right now, it's stuck and frozen like on the buying side, on the sales side, but listings are creeping up. And we know that certainly part of this is investors unloading their investment properties,
deleveraging, right?
100%. So we know that. We know some of it is people anticipating a mortgage renewal, like the question that we got earlier. That was an extreme case where she had a 1.69 and is worried about renewing. But even some people who had a 3% mortgage can't renew at 6.7 today. They just can't. So maybe some people are selling. So it's not quite stuck because listings are increasing, but sales are staying low, right?
Hence it's falling. It's receding. Yes. In a sense. The demand is really receding. All right. Well, I think, and I hope everyone found that helpful. I know I did. I should mention that John and some of our viewers mentioned other segments and other shows, all the live monthly market updates. And I believe there was a reference, John, to the video you did about, how to make sure your agent's a good negotiator, either they're
Right.
experienced in a slowing market. All of these shows are available on both our YouTube channel and our Move Smartly podcast channel. So you can find all of these shows there. And maybe I'll go ahead and add some of the links to that in our show notes so it helps you find them more easily. Again, I found this so interesting. Thank you for sharing your personal situations. I know there's a lot of anxiety out there, and I know that, we're all feeling it. And hopefully some of these answers helped our viewers. And please keep your questions coming. Let's give out that email one more time, John, to our show.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, again, thank you as well for sending your questions. I think they're important, and there's a lot of obviously concerns, and what's happening in the market impacts people's life decisions. So, I mean, I'm grateful that people can share them with us and we can talk about them, because I've heard from other people. Everyone learns from other people's experiences. Yeah, the email, I mean, please send your questions, ask John at movesmartly.com, and we'll do our best to kind of get them on our next segment.
Great. And you can always reach me at editor@movesmartly.com. Thank you. And we'll see you soon.